All right, everybody, welcome back to Unit 3. I think this is Day 5. So we've been wrapping up with the Constitution and, talking about all of the stuff that's gone into it, making our Great Compromise, and then each of the three branches of government. We've got our checks and balances. So now the only thing that's left is to convince everyone that this is a good idea and get it ratified. So the way the ratification process is going to work is we're going to need 9 out of the 13 states to ratify the Constitution in order for it to go into effect. Now, obviously, everyone will eventually have to ratify it because, we need all 13 states to agree to live under the same law, but after 9 ratify is when it's good to go to start, making the new move. So to convince everyone that it is a good idea or that it is not a good idea, we see 2 groups form, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Now, some people say these were our first 2 political parties, but I disagree. I don't think that these are political parties because their only focus here at this time is the Constitution. They're a one-issue group. Now, down the line, they will morph into political parties a few years after this, but at this time in 1788, 1789, it is pretty much just only about the Constitution, so they're a one-issue group. So the Federalists support the Constitution, while the Anti-Federalists do not. Federalists are generally people like Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, James Madison, people who were present at the Constitutional Convention. That makes sense because, they helped write it, so it makes sense that they would like it. They argued that, the Articles of Confederation were clearly too weak. We've now created a newer, stronger government that has a separation of powers, has checks and balances, so it is a better system. We've made sure that, we've put fail-safes in place to make sure it doesn't get too out of control. The Anti-Federalists, on the other hand, argued that it was much too powerful, that while we have a separation of powers and we have checks and balances, there's nothing to stop the federal government as a whole from getting too out of control. The states can't check, Congress in any way, so we don't have any way to verify that power is balanced between the state, the federal, and on a local level. That's a lot more difficult. They argued that, the federal government would grow far too strong and that it would trample on the rights of the people, trample on the rights of the states, and that while the Articles of Confederation were not working, this is not the solution. One of their main arguments was that we needed a Bill of Rights. We need a series of amendments that lay out what a person's civil liberties are, and at this moment we don't have anything like that, which is causing quite a few problems. So Anti-Federalists are generally people who were not present at the Constitutional Convention, guys like Sam Adams, Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, Mercy Otis Warren. She was a writer during this era who argued a lot about how we were creating a government that was too strong. So one thing that the Federalists have to their advantage is they wrote the Constitution, so they know what's in it. They have a bit of an upper hand in terms of convincing states. They've got a bit of a head start against the Anti-Federalists, so that is good for them. Federalists are typically supported in big cities. They tend to be wealthier and educated. Anti-Federalists are a little less organized, but there are more Anti-Federalists than there are Federalists. They were a much more diverse group. They had, every social class, every economic class, and they were much more supported outside of larger cities and more rural areas. So to try and convince people and take advantage of that head start, 3 of our Federalists will make the decision to write a series of essays entitled the Federalist Papers, basically to inform people about the Constitution and why it was written the way it was and all of its purposes and details. Those 3 men are James Madison, John Jay, and Alexander Hamilton. They're going to write all of these essays under an anonymous name, Publius, which basically means like the people, the public. So it's like of the people, by the people type of deal. So the original plan was to write a series of 75 essays, the work divided evenly among all of them, each of them writing 25. Unfortunately, John Jay got sick after writing 5. James Madison wrote 29. Alexander Hamilton will end up writing the other 51. So they will write a total of 85 essays, 10 more than they had originally planned because Alexander Hamilton is so long-winded. They published these in New York. Madison is one of our framers, so a lot of his ideas inspired the Constitution. In his essays, he primarily wrote about political theory, what a republican government needs, how it helps to balance the wants of small groups, how government should the relationship between government and the people, how that should operate, and he explained how the separation of powers worked. Alexander Hamilton, he introduced each of the documents and explained them, and he really focused on reason and logic, and the logic for a strong central government, why we need it, and he talked a lot about how the Supreme Court would function as a whole.